well-being of our people, and set forth peace among all nations through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Let us say together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forever. Amen.
Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Announcements by Your Honor the Deputy President.
I have received communication and correspondence from the President. He is at the CCJ doing a case today. We've also received correspondence from Mr. Jerome Walcott, Senator Jerome Walcott, Senator Lucille Moore, Senator Monique Tate, and Senator Rawdon Adams. These will not be able to attend today.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers.
Mr. Deputy President, I am commanded to lay the results of the external debt exchange offer, as well as to lay the duties, taxes, and other payments exemption Bank of New York Mellon Corporation Order 2019. Mr. Deputy President, you may recall that the latter was laid at the last sitting of this Honourable House. At that time, the resolution number was not affixed, and this has now been done, and I am therefore laying at this time.
Reports from select committees. Questions to ministers. Requests for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries. Personal explanations. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate, moved by minister.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Standing Order 22-1 be suspended in relation to the Family Law Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2019, the Family Law Dissolutions of Marriages, Indemnification and Validation Bill 2019, and the Offenses Against Persons Amendment Bill 2019. The reason, sir, is because these items are appearing on the order paper earlier than the day to which notice was given. I can assure my colleagues that it is not the intention for us to debate these matters today, and it is simply a procedural matter in this regard that we now suspend Order 22.1.
Are we dealing with 45-2 at the same time?
Given
22-1 first. The question is that Standing Order 22-1 be suspended for the remainder of today.
Mr. Deputy President, I beg to move that Senator Rogers be appointed chairman of committees for the rest of today's sitting.
The question is that Senator Rogers be appointed chairman of committees for the remainder of today's sitting. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Senator Rogers will be appointed as chairman of committees for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Introduction of bills.
Mr. Deputy President, I beg to give notice of the Family Law Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2019, the Family Law Dissolutions of Marriages, Indemnification and Validation Bill 2019, and the Offenses Against the Person Amendment Bill 2019, and I ask that they be read a first time.
The question is that the bills so mentioned be read a first time. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Public business, sir. Order number 3, in the name of the Honourable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Economic Partnership Agreement between the Caribbean Community, the Dominican Republic, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, Bill 2019.
Mr. Deputy President, as I rise to introduce the Economic Partnership Agreement Bill 2019, which relates to the Economic Partnership Agreement between the Caribbean Community, the Dominican Republic, the United Kingdom of Great Britain, and Northern Ireland, I am reminded, sir, of how interconnected the world is. What happens in one part of the world, far away from Barbados, in this case, over 4,167 miles away in the UK, it can have a direct impact on Barbados. And we, therefore, need to care about our international relationships as well as our domestic relationships, sir, as they can indeed affect us. Relationships change, sir, whether between countries or between people. And when change happens internationally, Barbados has to respond in a manner that safeguards our interests and equally leaves opportunity open where possible for our people and our businesses. It is against this background, sir, that this bill is being introduced. But, Mr. Deputy President, there's a backstory to this bill. It is one that Barbados had no active part of and had no hand in the decisions or the outcomes. Yet we are here, sir, in this honorable house seeking to pass legislation to deal with repercussions of actions taken by the United Kingdom, a country with which we have had, a sovereign state with which we've had historically close and long-distance relationships. We are not in this alone, however, Mr. Deputy President. Other members of CARIFORUM who are party to an agreement that pre-existed this situation, an agreement with the European Union and CARIFORUM countries, we're all in this together. And so that just for the sharing with our honorable colleagues here, those CARIFORUM countries include, who are in this with us, include Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, Commonwealth of Dominica, the Dominican Republic, Grenada, the Republic of Guyana, the Republic of Haiti, Jamaica, St. Christopher and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Republic of Suriname, and the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. This is the group of CARIFORUM countries that were in agreement with the European Union and who are now the subject and parties to this new agreement that is the highlight of this bill. I said, sir, that there was a backstory. And the backstory is one of divorce. It is the divorce of the United Kingdom from the European Union. Without getting into the intimate and technical details, sir, of their fallout, here's a quick sequence of events that have brought us here with this bill. In June 2016, the United Kingdom held a referendum on whether they would remain married in the European Union or whether or not they will go split. 51.89% of the votes said let's split up with the European Union, according to the official record, that is. Now, while that referendum was non-binding, the government of the time determined that they will enforce the results. And so that was followed up by the succeeding government as well to implement those results. And back in March 2017, the UK would have initiated its official withdrawal process from the European Union. Sir, again, just as a bit of background, there were 28 countries in the European Union. These are 28 countries that have agreed to a political and an economic union. They have agreed that markets that are together within their borders will be treated as one single market of all those countries that are apart, a single market, and that they would apply a standardized system of laws on certain matters where they agree to act as one. So, sir, when the UK decided that it no longer wanted to act together as one, it upset the apple cart of the economic union with these countries. And what it also did, it affected the agreement that countries like Barbados and those other CARIFORUM countries I mentioned earlier, where we had that agreement with the European Union, with the United Kingdom a part of it. Now that the United Kingdom was exiting, we asked, now what will happen to our trade with the UK when they are no longer a part of the EU agreement that gave us that safeguard and protection? The intention for many of us whose relationship was closest with the United Kingdom, like Barbados, compared to other European countries, the business opportunity for us was that goods and services that we managed to get into the UK could then have easier access to the rest of Europe because the UK was part of that single union. And that meant less tariffs. And for those who are not trade talkers, tariffs is basically just the tax on imports, exports, or the transits of goods, services through barriers. We expected there would be less barriers. We expected there would be less hassle. That was the plan, sir, when we entered the economic partnership agreement between the European Union and CARIFORUM countries before UK decided to divorce. That was the plan. But before I get to the rest of what happened after, I want to share a few truths about what really happened with Barbados and the pre-existing agreement to this one, which this bill is seeking to address. The truth is that Barbados, like many others, we have not implemented the CARIFORUM EU agreement as well as we could have. And there are many different reasons, Mr. Deputy President, all of which have contributed either to the underutilization of the agreement or the forfeiting of opportunities under this agreement. I said there were many reasons, sir. Partly because some businesses that would need to drive exports into the UK and the EU and Europe were not aware of some of the enabling provisions. Partly, sir, because we have not managed to mobilize the country around work to be done to make the products and the services eligible, compliant, or export ready in some regards. Partly, sir, too, because we have not been able to get the mutual recognition agreements called MRAs, sir. And basically, MRAs, in a very simplified terms, sir, are agreements between parties that say that we meet or conform to each other's standards, whether there are quality standards for goods or there are professional standards for consultants, for example, who might be sharing those. And unless you have those mutual recognition agreements, you may not be able to get the access that would otherwise be provided. And sir, I said there were many reasons. There's partly too, sir, because there have been some other barriers. Not accusing any, but perhaps on the other side, there have been some barriers that have constrained our ability to penetrate the market. And so, sir, the list of the partly reasons go on, saying to us that there is no silver bullet to how we would be able, even in this new arrangement, there's no single approach that it would take for us to be able to take full advantage of this new agreement. What we do have to do is to use the opportunity of the new economic partnership agreement, which is the subject of this bill, to do better on all of the other fronts. Now, I know that others who will speak after me will share on some of the things that Barbados is doing in order to do better on those fronts. And so, sir, I will give the opportunity to all those who wish to make their contribution after. Needless to say, Barbados is aware, and we have already started to address some of these matters in a very systematic way. But let me go back, sir, to the economic partnership agreement that is the subject of this bill. Already about 11 years have expired in the 25-year agreement. And you ask, well, why are you entering an agreement and some of the time has already expired? Because the agreement that was made with the UK and CARIFORUM countries is that they would roll over the agreement from the CARIFORUM countries and the European Union into the CARIFORUM UK agreement. And so if the time has passed, the time has passed. You can't go back and reset the clock. If there were certain transitions that had to be made by a certain time, and the time to make those transitions have passed, no provision would be made in this new arrangement for those same transactions, because as far as they're concerned, it is now past. We would be happy to know, sir, that many provisions are very much the same as what we would have negotiated what we had negotiated with the European Union. There are a few changes. Some I have just mentioned. Some relate to simple things of wordings and references to EU institutions and law that would no longer apply in a UK situation, but where that language would have been changed then to refer to UK institutions and laws, etc. Some of the changes, though, Mr. Deputy President, I'd like to highlight that are significant in this one. One is that this new wording now allows goods to transit Europe without being deemed as having changed their origin. Now, for those who are non-trade specialists, there are certain criteria that goods have to make, say they're leaving Barbados to go into the UK under special preferential treatment. There are certain rules of origin criteria that says this has originated in Barbados. And what happens is that we have noticed that when a good goes from Barbados to another country, it doesn't always take a straight route. Sometimes it goes through a third country. It goes through a third country. Sometimes we will export product by bulk, but then it goes into a country before it gets to its final destination, and we break it down into small batches. We label it, we store it. What this particular text allows us to do is to ensure that when our products have to go through, transit through Europe, a third party in Europe, before it gets, say, to the UK, and any of these processes have to be applied to them, that they will still be deemed originating in Barbados and eligible to the preferential access when they get to the United Kingdom. And there are checks and balances in place to ensure that that does not turn different than it is. Another important change in this is the Development Corporation. It was a significant part of the EU CARIFORUM EPA meaning the Economic Partnership Agreement. Now, Development Corporation, again, refers simply to provisions of assistance to poor and less developed countries to help them to develop. That's all the Development Corporation means. Now, this is usually administered through the European Development Fund, and the UK was the second largest contributor, 5.8%, to this Development Corporation budget as a part of the EU family. Now, you say, so now what happens? The UK has agreed, and it is in this agreement, that they will continue until 2020 to contribute to the EU for Development Corporation. What this bill also provides, this bill and the agreement which was signed now agrees to, is that a technical subcommittee on Development Corporation will continue to monitor broadly and specific areas of cooperation with regards to Development Corporation going forward with the UK. And that is a good thing for us. What is also a good thing, Mr. Deputy President, is that the CARIFORUM countries have done some work in terms of determining if you're going to have Development Corporation, how does it fit our priorities? And some of the priorities that have been identified, I would wish to share because it is important for us to understand the agreements that we have made that are the subject of this bill. We have agreed as one of our cooperation priorities to build the human, legal, and institutional capacity to comply with our commitments. We have made it a priority of fiscal reform, but fiscal reform that would improve our tax administration and improve the collection of tax so that we can make a shift from dependence on tariffs and other duties and charges to other forms of indirect taxes. As a priority, support measures to promote private sector and enterprise development, and I'm sure Dr. Holder would be happy to hear also small economic operators and to enhance their international competitiveness and the economic diversification. Another priority, sir, and the CARIFORUM countries took the time to define the priorities: to diversify exports of goods and services through new investments and new sectors, to enhance technological and research capabilities, to develop innovation systems and develop technological capacity, and finally, to develop the infrastructure necessary for the conduct of trade. And I am sure that Senator Cummings would be happy about that aspect as well. Thirdly, we agreed, an important part in this agreement is that there will be joint institutions, a special committee on agriculture and fisheries, which has been a bugbear in our relationships for a very long time. Special committee on services, as you know, much of the export opportunities for countries like Barbados is really in services. And there is definite need for us to be able to keep a close eye and keep the dialogue going in significant ways on services. And of course, I mentioned earlier the technical subcommittee on development cooperation. There are some critical parts of the structure that will help us to go forward and to monitor and to continue to dialogue and to develop those areas in a meaningful way. Let's talk about Barbados just a little bit. We talked earlier about the fact that Barbados had not been able, let's just say we have taken advantage, but not to the extent we could, of this agreement. Exports to the UK in 2008, let's look at the last 10 years before this one. 2008 were approximately 67,248,867. 67 plus million. Last year, that was down to 13 million, 33,319. Our exports were cane sugar, other rum, tafia, variable resistors, artificial parts of the body, other body implants, falernum, frozen chicken, pepper sauce, Morby, sweet biscuits. Those were the top ones, sir. And clearly we can see that with that significant drop off, we need to look at new strategies to cause our trade to go in the other direction. Not down, but up. Whether we choose to revitalize traditional exports in traditional markets, or find new exports to traditional markets, or find new exports in new markets, there are several options that are available to us, and that really has to be a strategic decision that we make as a country and as sectors in moving forward. And understand that none of these approaches, whether you go new into old or old into new markets, whatever the mix of market strategies we use, they're not mutually exclusive. We can do several different approaches at once, but we have to be mindful, Mr. Deputy President, that there are only so many resources we have to use for export development and promotion. And we have to get clear about what will we focus on. Where best is the cost-benefit case met? Where is growth possible? Where are we export ready now? So we have those low-hanging fruit. Where and with whom can we forge partnerships, joint ventures, and other mutually beneficial collaborations to produce, distribute, or sell the products and services of Barbados? These are the questions, not just for us as a country, but as the business community in particular as well, to address. Now, this bill seeks to keep the door of opportunity open for preferential access for products and services into the UK market for those businesses that have the ambition and the wherewithal to move and take advantage. And when passed, and I am optimistic that this Honourable House will see it fit to pass this bill, it will give the force of law in Barbados to the Economic Partnership Agreement, which was signed between the Caribbean community and the Dominican Republic on the one part, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland on the other part. Mr. Deputy Chairman, it is with this introduction that I wish to invite the honourable senators to make their contribution to this debate, and I beg that this bill be read a second time.
Good afternoon, Deputy President and other honourable members of the Senate. I want to first thank the Acting Leader of Government Business for her introduction to the bill. It was quite comprehensive, and she raised a number of points and questions that we rightfully must address as it relates to economic growth in Barbados going forward, and how do we envision those types of strategies. And sir, I raised to support the bill before the House, the Economic Partnership Agreement Bill 2019. And I also want to congratulate the government and the rest of CARIFORUM for being proactive in the face of much uncertainty as it relates to the relationship between the United Kingdom and the EU. Sir, what this EPA does is it ensures some level of stability to our trade relations with respect to one of our major trading partners, and that is something to be commended. And I know that when these arrangements were being discussed or contemplated, the members at the table could not foresee that there would be one change in the Prime Minister before the end of the year, an election in the UK on December 12th, which is next week, and even more so that Brexit will still be on the table, and now we have an extension until January 2020, the end of January 2020. So the level of uncertainty around our relationship and our trade relationship with the UK has been quite tumultuous for the last couple of months, or even better yet, years. And so that type of uncertainty is not good for business because it makes planning extremely difficult. And what CARIFORUM has sought to do through this arrangement is to mitigate some of this uncertainty and to establish a more formal arrangement in the face of Brexit. Sir, Barbados is known for being a service-driven economy, mainly, and that is through the tourism sector. And what I want to talk about a little bit today is how do we take advantage of these types of arrangements? And the Acting Leader of Government Business rightfully acknowledged that we don't always take full advantage and utilization of the agreements that we have available to us. And how do we allow Barbadians and Barbadian businesses to take advantage so that they can expand their operations and increase the level of exports coming from Barbados? Sir, we hear a lot of rhetoric sometimes about, you should open a business. Start up a business. It is one of the ways in which we can drive economic growth. And sir, a part of that conversation is usually missing. And that is where I want to go today, because it is in relation to product development and even for Barbados, the type of services that we offer. Sir, I want to talk today about something called the product space. And it is a term that was defined and expanded on by two individuals, primarily one, Ricardo Hausman and Cesar Haldego, both of Harvard Kennedy School. And two papers that I will be referring to today, one called Country Diversification, Product Ubiquity and Economic Divergence in 2010 by those two individuals I just mentioned. And the second paper is one that was published by the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, Policies for Achieving Structural Transformation in the Caribbean. Those two papers. Sir, when they talk about the product space, I want you to think about something that looks like an intricate spider web. And what those two individuals sought to do was to look at how products are developed and what are the network capabilities that bind those products together. And sir, when the Caribbean was mapped up against that spider web, it was found that the products that we produce are far apart. They don't have a lot of connectivity to them. So the Caribbean doesn't have the network capacity, as they call it, to produce similar products with the same type of capabilities. And those countries that have, or produce products rather, in the smaller, more connected nodes in the network can easily transfer from producing one product to the other because they had the same capabilities and inputs into the process. Sir, only Jamaica and Trinidad had some moderate network nodes because, of course, they have some manufacturing capacity. But sir, in Barbados, it seems that we don't have the physical and technical capabilities to produce a variety of products based on the same network capabilities. So sir, in layman terms, if you are producing clothing, it would be easier to then transfer, if you see a dip in that market, to start producing linen, sheets, pillows, because you have the capacity to transfer easily, as opposed to trying to produce perfume. That's a harder leap to make, Mr. Deputy President. And what I want to mention here is, I know government has mentioned in some of its discussions to the public that we're moving towards a people-driven and people-centered economy. And I also noted quite notably that the acting leader of government business still identified that we need to identify sectors going forward and do that strategically. And I'm very happy that she said that, Mr. Deputy President, because even though we move towards empowering persons, we have to develop what I would call these ecosystems of capabilities now, with those said identified sectors moving forward, that we can allow persons in Barbados to produce similar products with the same type of know-how, technical capabilities, and inputs, so that we start to diversify the product offering to the world in which we supply. And why is that somewhat of a good strategy? I think if we move in that direction, along with identifying those niche areas and those value-added products, we are too small to spread a lot of scarce resources that we have, the scarce resources that we have. And it would be beneficial for us to start looking at the transferability of the inputs, Mr. Deputy President, that we have here in Barbados. When I was reflecting on the bill and the notes that I put together, I thought about our rum production. We clearly have a niche area there, but what is it that we can produce now, in addition to rum, that may have the same inputs, but it's also another niche specialty product and area, flavored rums I'm hearing on the side. Or even going a step further and start to connect the things that we do have. And as a vegetarian, no, sir, I'm not going to insist that we promote eating a lot of lamb, But I will say that if, for instance, we have a marinade that is made from the derivatives of the rum that we have, and we say to persons on the export market or the international market, when you eat Bajan black belly lamb, it has to be marinated in this specific marinade from Barbados, derived from Barbadian rum. And that is the kind of connectivity that I am talking about, Mr. Deputy President. That is the type of connectivity that I am talking about. And I mean, that will take a lot of market research and development and everything else. But, sir, it is a step in the direction where we have to start thinking very differently about the things that we produce and what else can we produce with what we have. That is what I'm trying to put across this afternoon. So, sir, and that is on the product side, even in terms of IT services or online services moving forward in this technological age, as it relates to IT support systems, if you're talking about gaming, if you're talking about graphic design, those types of services also need a specific set of infrastructure in place in order to facilitate those online services. And one of the things that I've always wondered, and maybe it does exist, but I'm not aware of it, is when you're talking about those types of IT services, online services, even something as simple as a think tank space, moving forward in terms of the technological era, Mr. Deputy President, we have to facilitate ideas, because in the new era, ideas will matter and they will create value for us. But we have to create the space by which they can foster and manifest, Mr. Deputy President. And sir, know that we are rightfully so moving towards a more stable economic position due to the measures that the government has introduced. We have to be very thoughtful and considerate about the economic opportunities that we pursue and how we pursue them. And we have to take the lessons from the past. And we cannot get around trying to achieve sustainable economic growth without addressing our export position. We have to get our exports moving in the right direction, as the acting leader of government business noted. Sir, some data that I found, the World Bank noted that in 2017, we had total exports of about $485 million US dollars. Total imports of US $1.5 billion. So therefore, we have a negative trade balance of about $1.1 billion. And looking now at the Central Bank of Barbados' 2018 report, you can see where a lot of our inflows come as it relates to products in Barbados. Number one on the list, rum. It accounted for 79.8 million Barbados dollars in 2018. Food, $65.3 million. Sugar took a massive hit between 2017 and 2018, a hit of 97%. We moved from $13.5 million in exports as it relates to sugar to $400,000. So that took a massive hit. And we have to start to look at how do we utilize what is left of the industry, if that is the direction that we're going in, and what do we produce going forward. And a number of other products, Mr. Deputy President. We also produce chemicals, printed paper labels, and construction materials, and I'm sure much of that construction material is from cement, possibly. So there are areas that we do have export potential, but as I just mentioned, unless it is rum, food, and sugar, they're very disjointed in terms of what they need to be produced. So that is why I'm asking that we look at the ecosystem of capabilities, that network of things that allow us to use the same type of imports to produce various products. Sir, the bill before us has to become real to people on the ground. Entrepreneurs, need to be able to explore new opportunities in a way that is effective for business. And as I said, they can only do that if they are operating in an environment that facilitates it. And what government, entrepreneurs in the private sector, and everyone else in that set of persons need to start doing is to start to identify those new and emerging markets and those complementary products and services that we have either a niche in, a competitive advantage, or we see some value in producing it for the rest of the world. And sir, once we can start to look at the transferability of inputs, I think that is very important because, as I said, we have scarce resources. If we start to look at the transferability of inputs, I think that our efforts can be more efficient in terms of our production potential. One of the other things I want to note is that because the bill is also couched in CARIFORM, that is the basis of the agreement, is in those studies that I mentioned earlier, it noted that CARICOM countries lagged in terms of the structural reforms that it has embarked on in the last 20, 25 years. We are behind, Mr. Deputy President. But when that study collectively looked at CARICOM, given all of the political nuances and the social aspects of CARICOM, as a single, fully integrated country, we produced a higher level of GDP across the board, and we had a greater level of export sophistication. And that is something, sir, that we have to take stock of moving forward as a region and start to realize that we have a lot more in common than we have divided. So, sir, the government now has the opportunity to use this agreement to mobilize emerging and new business. But we have to do that on the backdrop of introducing some policy measures as well. I know it was also suggested in the 2018 budget, I stand corrected, that we were introducing a peer-to-peer lending platform. I think that is an excellent idea, and that's something that we have to think about and develop if we are talking about introducing new business so that we can mobilize capital in a way that we haven't before. We have to also think about how we utilize the space that we have in terms of the infrastructure that is around. A lot of derelict buildings are around that we do not use, we don't utilize them efficiently or effectively, Mr. Deputy President. So even in terms of how we utilize our infrastructure and what type of activities occur in those spaces is something that we have to strategically look at. We have to look at cooperative development, getting persons to start to think about how we get group economics into the norm of Barbadian business and economy, because by and large, a lot of people do things in isolation. And if we can start to get persons together to bring together their resources, we can start to see movement in terms of business development. And sir, why do we have to take advantage of these opportunities? Also, from a fiscal position, it is important. Government has to shift towards generating revenues from productive activities rather than from taxes and fees directly taken from its citizens, which at the moment some will say is quite unbearable, Mr. Deputy President. And if you can have productive activities generating the revenue that is needed to service a lot of your social services, then you stand to be in a better position financially in terms of your fiscal account. So, sir, what I have explained to you is just one area where there has been research in terms of how does the Caribbean move forward in terms of business facilitation, business development, product development. And one of the things I also want to know is that it is not that we lack information. there's a lot of information out there for us to take advantage and for us to implement. However, that seems to where we fall short. The implementation deficit has caused us to, as rightly said, it has caused us to lag in terms of moving forward, in terms of our economic development. And sir, I really hope that we can take advantage now, moving forward, of these types of arrangements, with the backdrop of having a long-term plan for this country. And when I say long-term, I'm talking about a 20, 30-year type of vision. Because what we will continue to find is, as the global uncertainty increases, we will find ourselves faltering here, there, and everywhere, trying to play catch-up, Mr. Deputy President. And sir, I say that because I don't know if the political context and the culture that currently exists is conducive for that type of long-term planning. If every 5 years we exercise our democratic right to vote, how do we propose something for 20, 30 years that we can all take hold of while we are in the midst of making short-term policy plans? And that is something that philosophically I wonder about a lot, Mr. Deputy President. But nonetheless, I support the government, I said, with the tabling of this bill. And I really do hope that it moves us in a direction that can start to create new opportunities and jobs in Barbados. And I do implore the government to put measures in place, some real measures in place, that allows for businesses to take advantage of the measures in the Economic Partnership Agreement. And sir, listening to the debate in the other place, the minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, she made quite an impassioned pledge towards Barbados making its mark on history's page again. And I want to hold her to that today. Because as a young person in Barbados, there are a lot of hard decisions that need to be made. And I really do hope that in the near future, this administration has the political will to make those hard decisions for the long-term viability of this country. Mr. Deputy President, I am obliged to you.
Thank you, Senator Drakes, for excellent speech, excellent contribution. I recognize Dr. Holder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy President, and good afternoon to all my colleagues. Following on from Senator Drake's presentation, I wish to focus this brief intervention this afternoon, Mr. Deputy President, on those issues that actually do touch and impact the ordinary person, and might I add, the MSME that's out there, the micro, small, and medium enterprise, the firm operating in not only Barbados but in the CARIFORUM region. I want to couch this presentation against a report recently prepared for the Caribbean Export Development Agency, titled CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, a firm-level review focused on trade and investment. Mr. Deputy President, it makes good reading for anyone in the chamber that really wants to have a good perspective on from the firms, from the businesses, the enterprises point of view. I think this document will make good reading. You know, Zig Ziglar once said that if you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. But if you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. Now, this quote, for me, Mr. Deputy President, is important as we go forward with our plans relative to the EPA now with the UK in light of all that is happening. Because if we do not learn from the experiences of the past and what would have occurred with the earlier iteration of this EPA, I dare suggest that we will be prone to repeat some of the mistakes. And I want to ensure that we do not repeat those mistakes, but that in fact we learn, Mr. Deputy President, from those situations. And therefore, let me couch the first part of this presentation within that context. As we know, we would have had, yes, this EPA in 2008. The acting leader of government business gave us a good overview. But a few additional things I would wish to share. I recall, Mr. Deputy President, at that time, a new administration came to office in Barbados. And in early 2008, yes, the agreement was entered, was signed, and we were all, especially in the private sector, keen on the opportunities that we can seize, we can grasp, that we can benefit from, that we can maximize from this new agreement. I recall having several meetings in my association, and a hat that I wear, with the ambassador at the time heading up the EPA implementation unit to try to get small firms to understand through a number of training initiatives what the EPA was, what are the benefits that they can accrue to their operations, what do we need to do as a private sector relative to building capacity, relative to forming strategic partnerships across the CARIFORUM region. This engaged my attention, Mr. Deputy President, as they say, for the first 2 years or so of the agreement having been signed. It was billed as the greatest opportunity that we have at this time to access the EU region. As you know, the EU region represents a significant market for the trade of goods and services. So we were gun-ho, as the young people would say, excited about it. But that excitement quickly waned, sir, after a couple of things occurred. One, the same EPA implementation unit was subsequently closed by that administration, which impacted our ability now to draw on the resources to help with the capacity building, to help with the training and so on. Questions when being asked, there was no unit and therefore no persons around, the personnel, competent persons around that can really, in my view, address these issues. So the EPA implementation unit was closed. In addition to that, the government at the time would have partnered with the Inter-American Development Bank to be able to access financial resources that would help us to put in place a lab, a laboratory, a facility to be able to help those small firms who want now to access the market, the EU market, Mr. Deputy President, to be able to undergo the necessary testing of their goods. As you know, the EU has very strict criteria for entering the market relative to sanitary and phytosanitary issues. And so the IADB was contacted, was sourced, and an agreement was entered that Barbados can access the needed resources to allow for us to put in place that lab to facilitate, primarily I would add, MSMEs, because the bigger companies, Mr. Deputy President, often had the resources, they had the capital that they can engage the scientists and the different professionals to assist with the testing of their goods and so on, and make sure that these goods meet the necessary criteria. But not so for MSMEs. And would you know, Mr. Deputy President, that the administration failed to meet various criteria relative to that engagement, and so two things occurred. One, we don't have the testing facility. Two, we lost out on the monies because we were not able to meet milestones relative to the engagement, and so the monies were returned to the IADB. So what has happened as a result is that not having a lab, we now do not really have that facility to assist our small firms to be able to improve the quality of their product, to be able to meet the standards and so on for access in the EU market. So two things, two critical things: close the EPA implementation unit and fail to deliver on this particular project relative to us having a lab here in Barbados to assist with that. So I am hopeful that as we go forward, having learned from those two situations, that we may consider how do we improve the opportunities for small firms to build capacity that they can in turn access those markets, and in building capacity be able to help with the phytosanitary and sanitary issues that they can access the EU market. So that's my first point, Mr. Deputy President. Secondly, we're talking about enabling this MSME sector to be able to access this huge market. But we do have constraints. We have significant constraints. And so, remember I said that I'm coaching this against the backdrop that if you don't learn from the past, we're prone to repeat the mistakes as we go forward in the future. So we have to address the capacity issues. This report that I cited earlier indicated across merchandise trade and services, there were a myriad of challenges. But I just want to mention just a few. The issue of size, small size. Yeah. So we're talking about being able to access this huge market, but we do have an issue of size. Now for me, I am a strong believer and a proponent of cluster development, strategic alliances and partnerships. I am of the view, Mr. Deputy President, that you cannot go at it alone when you are small. So the Lone Ranger concept does not fly for me. I know that many of us will agree. Yeah. We watch the Lone Ranger movies and so on growing up, and we love this picture, and maybe it would have left a particular imprint on our psyche. But the fact is that when it comes to the practical operations of business, the Lone Ranger ideology will not work. And therefore, to be able to mitigate the issue of small size, we have to work together. We have to identify clusters. We have to be able to come together in strategic alliances and partnerships and so on, leverage our resources, leverage our strengths across not only our country here, but across CARIFORUM. And this is really, in my view, why the CSME is so critical. The CSME is key, Mr. Deputy President. This regime was introduced primarily to facilitate the private sector, that we can be able to access markets. I like to use the term of stretching our muscles, building muscles in the regional space first, even before we consider extra-regional exports. I know Senator Cummins will tell me, but you can leapfrog. You can leapfrog the regional market to go international. I agree with that. But I'm also satisfied that we ought to be using the single market and economy to help our firms to build capacity at that level first. So we have an issue of small size. We have an issue of shipping. Yes. Mr. Deputy President, shipping and the shipping rates. The cost to ship goods from here to the EU, again, is another constraint. This is what the data, this is what the research is saying. I mentioned the sanitary issues just now. Overall competitiveness and the ability to access financing to be able to scale up your products. These are some of the challenges that we must address in what I call the second iteration of this EPO in order to see the kind of impact that we want to see. Thirdly, Mr. Deputy President, the data says we've not really performed very well in the past. I think Senator Drakes, we agree. I'm very thankful that the opposition has wholeheartedly agreed with government this morning that this is a step in the right direction. Senator Drakes, speaking for the opposition, Mr. Deputy President, speaking for the opposition. But what does the data say? The data says that, as we know, we had 25 years to, I like to put it, get our act together. Can you imagine signing an agreement that gave you a 25-year grace period? Mr. Deputy President, and for the first 10, 11 years, you practically did nothing about it. No. Yes, this particular bill before us is looking at an amendment and so on to the first iteration. But had we not come here, we would be facing 2033 just around the corner, having really not put our systems in place to maximize on this agreement. But we're here today looking at the UK. And the facts are that based on the information we have, we've not done well in our ability to really access these markets. As you know, this was a duty-free, quota-free provision in the agreement. And the main items that have been exported, based on the data we have, are rum, bananas, sugar, oil, and gas derivatives. But the fine print of the report suggests, Mr. Deputy President, that there was some opportunity for those in the agribusiness sector. Because the information indicates that in 2014, Barbados was able to export sauces, condiments, mixed seasonings, etc., to a value of $300,000 in 2014. Mr. Deputy President, this declined by 2018 to just 30,000.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? This is the report that I mentioned done for the Caribbean Export Development Agency. $300,000 in 2014, which suggests that, you know, we had a small, within the context of the value of exports in the EU, it's not even 1%, okay? But the fact is, we started the process.
Yeah.
And by 2018, that had declined to $30,290. And that is Barbados. As I said, the report makes good reading. The data is there for all of the countries within CARIFORUM. I go on. Beauty products, skincare products, and I'm identifying those sectors that are there to my membership. 2014, $38,000, Mr. Deputy President. And by 2018, it was only 15. It was only 15,000. It was halved by 2018. And this is because during that time, Mr. Deputy President, we failed to put the necessary systems in place, as I said, to build the capacity of our firms, etc. And if we do not take heed of that and correct it as we go forward now with the UK, we may have a similar challenge when we review our performance. Conversely, the data indicates that while Barbados, and I heard the deputy leader, the acting leader of government business this morning refer to some numbers, my report from the Caribbean Export Development Agency suggests a slight difference, but I think the spirit is the same. And that is that merchandise trade, and I believe the acting leader may have included services in her report, but this one was goods only. Suggested from this report some $21 million in 2008 from Barbados, the value of our exports to the EU. And by 2017, that had declined to 6.2 million. And this is goods only, right? But this is the Caribbean exports data. But what is the commonality across the two sets of information? Is that there was a significant decline. That's the point. A significant decline. So if you have 21 million or otherwise, by 2017, 2018, it had declined significantly. That is the point. That is the point. But yet, when we look at the CARIFORUM region, we see that the Dominican Republic had a different experience, because the DR, based on that information, in 2008 exported some $81 million in goods to the EU. And by 2017, that was $128 million, Mr. Deputy President. So what is it then that the DR would have done to be able to turn their fate around over the same period of time? And I believe that is maybe a discussion for another time, right? But they're definitely learnings that I believe we can draw from that experience. But moving on to my other point, Mr. Deputy President, given this kind of performance, the question then is, what is it that we really ought to do to make sure that as we go forward with this UK arrangement, we can maximize on the opportunities that are there for firms, for enterprises. I alluded earlier to the issue of capacity building. That's one. We want to make sure that, yes, we can mobilize our small firms, that we can have the right kind of relationships, the right kind of models. I dare suggest drawing on the CSME as definitely a first step. Secondly, the point was mentioned about the mutual recognition agreement, because my data so far has been on goods. But we want now to be able to move to the export of our services, and we cannot do so if we do not address this MRA situation. Because if in the EU they do not recognize the certification and qualification of our architects, of our engineers, of our management consultants, etc., they will not be able to access the market. So we have to ensure we put those arrangements in place. We have to. Thirdly, I'm calling again for some implementation unit to be set up. We need to have that in place. We need to have that kind of support, Mr. Deputy President, that would help across the CARIFORUM region. If we have the resources, and I know that we have a government that will try to find the resources, right? We need to be able to put in place that implementation unit, because it will definitely help with the capacity building of our firms. That's the truth. It will help with the communication, the dissemination of information, etc. Because this report indicated that across CARIFORUM, many of our firms were not even aware of the EPO. There was actually one quote from Chamber of Commerce rep from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States that says, and I quote, "The market entry regulations that exist are very complex in both products and services." The research went on to suggest that many firms that were interviewed indicated they had no knowledge of the Economic Partnership Agreement, yet this was signed since 2008. So it tells me that on the ground, in our individual countries, we need to have that unit. We need to have a contact point. We need to have a face. We need to have, the resources in place that will help with the communication, the dissemination of information, etc., etc. Because interpreting these agreements require a particular skill set. That's the truth. To be able to take this language, and sometimes even though it's written in English, you still have to translate it in such a way that the average individual who is intended to benefit from this can understand and therefore can appropriate what the agreement is intended to do. So whereas I agree and support 100% this afternoon, Mr. Deputy President, the provisions in the bill, I want to suggest to us, let us make sure, having learned from the past, that we put the necessary systems in place to take us forward. And my final thought this afternoon, Mr. Deputy President, I'm being... Yes, thank you very much. My final thought is this. The world has changed. The world has changed. The world has changed. Who does not understand that concept, I would suggest, is living in a comatose state. The world has changed. And it hasn't changed today, not even yesterday, not even last year. For some time now, we have been warned, I suggest, we have been warned by the developed world that as a Caribbean, as a CARIFORUM region, we have to paddle our own canoe. We have been warned about this for some time. We have been a bit tardy, in my view, in putting the systems in place and the transitioning to the kind of operation that is needed for us to compete, for us to survive even. We have been tardy. We have been tardy in ensuring that the vision of CARICOM is realized, that what the original architects, if you will, of this integration project intended this to be is actually realized. We have been tardy. And while time has been going by, ticking by, we, Mr. Deputy President, in my view, have been a bit recalcitrant in doing what is needed to position our region for growth going forward. Now, what are some of the reasons that I may have come to this conclusion? When we look back, we are now coming to the end of, I think it's Cotonou. Cotonou has now to be renegotiated, I believe, in 2020, right? But before Cotonou, there were about, 3 or 4 iterations of the Lomé Agreement. When you look back at all of these agreements, Mr. Deputy President, the architects seem to be suggesting to us that we have to take control now of our own development and not rely on concessionary funding and grants and so on. They have been saying that to us now for a while. But we still go knocking, it would appear, knocking on their doors, still to take care of us when they're saying to us, we have weaned you off of ourselves, you have to take charge of your own destiny. You will recall, Mr. Deputy President, 3 things that maybe were done to help prop up our economies coming out of that independence period. You would recall that 1, the UK took our excess labor by having very lax immigration policies, because the view was we can't have any, rioting, and we need to make sure that we have a stable society and so on. So you had the very lax immigration rules, and therefore I recall growing up at a time when our neighbors went off to England to work, build the railroads and worked in the hospitals and all that. Then we saw what happened with the Rush situation here recently. But that was what occurred back then. That was 1. Secondly, they took our commodities, you recall? Yes, they took our sugar. In the case of Barbados and bananas and some others. All right? But they took our sugar. They gave us they gave us, Mr. Deputy President, the opportunity to continue to grow our sugar cane, and we had a ready market and so on, even though they could have gotten sugar from the beetroot. They're propped up, yes, they're propped up for a while, our sugarcane industry. And then what was the third one? We were able to go and get concessionary financing, we were able to get grants, we were able to access loans at very low interest rates. All of this was designed, Mr. Deputy President, to make sure that we could have propped our economies up. But I want to suggest in this chamber this afternoon that the primary reason wasn't that they were in love with the Caribbean. It wasn't that we were these favorite children. There was a bigger ideology. I want to suggest, is my humble opinion, that at the time prior to the Cold War ending, that the global players wanted to make sure that these small economies stayed as much as possible social democratic states. Because the two ideologies competing with each other at the time were capitalism and communism.
Correct.
So it wasn't no great love for us. It was simply that we needed to make sure that your economies were propped up. You can find employment for your people. You can find a market for your commodities. You can get some money to put in roads, hospitals, schools, and so on. We don't want you to become communists. But after the Cold War, Mr. Deputy President, that changed. It changed. And so we were told when those walls came down to paddle your own canoe. And I'm very passionate about this subject, Mr. Deputy President, because I am concerned that when you look at the history, there are very few bright sparks in our region relative to leadership who understood this concept and were committed to ensuring that the region was able to respond to this new ideology. Very few bright sparks. Very few bright sparks. I'm not going to call the names of who I thought were bright sparks, but there were very few. But at least there were some who understood that the game has changed, and it is now time for us to determine a new development model for the Caribbean.
Amen.
And so, CARICOM became important. The CARICOM integration project became important to that vision. And in the last 10, 12 years, we have seen across this region a number of persons coming to office with a different concept, who retarded the progress that was made, who did very little. Barbados, who had in the quasi-cabinet in CARICOM, had responsibility for the CSME, did nothing with it. Did nothing with it. Actually, the Prime Minister at the time went to a country talking about ever so welcome we have for a call. Did nothing with it. Retarded the process. Mr. Deputy President, if we do not put within context this bill before us today, I am saying that we will miss it. We have to put it within context. And so I am pleased that we have a Prime Minister now who is doing not only Barbados proud, but who is doing this Caribbean region proud and being able to lead the charge again for the CSME. As we have responsibility for it, because we understand that making the CSME work is an integral part of the development model for the Caribbean and ensuring that Barbados and the rest of the region can chart its development path. This is significant. So our ability, therefore, to maximize even now on this EU arrangement, this new economic partnership agreement with the EU, in the face of a possible Brexit, requires that we get our act together at the regional level. We strengthen this integration project. We ensure that we move towards the single economy as well, not only the single market. We have to get it right. And in doing so, Mr. Deputy President, I'm satisfied that we would have positioned ourselves. We would have positioned ourselves, as Senator Drake said, not only 20 years. I want to see a 50-year plan. I want to see 50-year plan. This is how the agents plan. They have 50 and 100-year plans. I want to see that emerging as a result.
Yes.
That would allow us, therefore, to secure the future of our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah, at stake.
So, Mr. Deputy President, with those few, with those few words, I support this bill,
Good word.
and I look forward to the rollout of a number of programs that would help us to strengthen the capacity of our private sector, our MSME sector in particular, and strengthen the regional effort to be able to maximize on the opportunities that can come from trade in the United Kingdom. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. You could hear the passion in your voice.
Mr. Deputy President, I beg to move that we suspend for lunch and return at 2:30 p.m.